Good morning, everybody. It is 10:30, and thank you for making the adjusted time. I know it's caught a few people out, but we've gone for 10:30 for reasons I won't go into. First thing is we have some apologies, quite a few apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Pert, Clements, Spencer, Thompson and Wileman.
Okay, and as you can see, we have Councillor Ian Parry who's attending online. The rest of all here in person. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Take that as a no. And then we go to the minutes of the meeting held 20th of January 2022, which was in the council chamber. Has everybody had a chance to see those and see they're a true record? Okay, I will sign that as such. Okay, which brings us to item 4, which is the integrated performance report for quarter 3. And you'll see it has the usual format, but we have also some charts. Do I hand over to Councillor White or to Kerry?
If I can lead off and then hand over to Ian Parry for his preamble, I think that would be a useful starting point, if that's okay with you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Accompanying me today is Councillor Ian Parry, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, who will come in a moment, John Tradewell and Kerry Dove, who are here to assist with more technical questions, should there be any. Thank you for the opportunity to present this retrospective report on the quarter 3 performance. What a lot has changed since this report was written, and it's always a bit difficult to be going through these things, looking in sort of what has happened in past history, when we know that the current events that are going on are having a huge impact on not just the global politics and global peace and security, but also at a more local level, the challenges that we face and Councillor Parry faces in particular in balancing the books as we move forward. So this is a retrospective, but I'm sure there may well be points that people wish to raise about current events and how we're planning to deal with those. These are always just a snapshot. I'd like to reassure the committee that the Cabinet spends a lot of time going through these reports prior to their presentation to both Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee. We spend more time than we've ever done looking at our performance, making sure that we give it a proper go-over so that we are checking ourselves frequently. This report is presented to you today to give you the opportunity to challenge and comment on those areas of work that we've focused on, but also I'd ask you to consider those parts of the operation of the organisation that perhaps we haven't focused in on that you might like to spend a little time thinking about, and we can tweak our reports in the future depending on the views of the Scrutiny Committee. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Ian Parry to talk about the money and the other components of our performance, and then perhaps, Mr. Chairman, I'll just hand over to John and Kerry if they've got anything that they wish to add as well.
Over to you, Councillor Parry.
Bear with me, Chair. Apologies, just a slight technical glitch. Good morning, everyone. This report really shows a point in time 6 months ago, and obviously, as the leaders already said, things have moved on. But what it does tell us, as at Q3 last year, is that the council was facing a number of challenges. Some of those which have, as the leader says, are more recent. But the challenges the council was facing then, and some of them are continue to be significant challenges around demand for domiciliary care, healthcare support, are challenges around ensuring that we deliver on the children's programme to ensure that we build resilient families and we prevent more children coming into the care system that don't need to be in the care system and are able to secure families in terms of children's remaining with families. The overall financial position, Q3, was that just shy of 4 million underspend, I'm pleased to tell you that at Q4, although these figures are obviously in draft, as it were, has maintained that sort of level of savings. Largely that's been achieved, I think, through the council hitting its savings targets, but also some areas of the council underspending where demand has been reduced due to the pandemic, etc. So we're still in a strong, stable position financially as a council, but facing significant challenges around proposed changes in the healthcare sector, the Social Care and Health Act. The implications of all of that yet to be ironed out and the detail yet to be revealed. But what I think we do know is that we'll put additional pressures and cost pressures on the council that we've yet to find out from the government how that's going to be managed. So overall, a good financial position as at Q3. As I say, pleased to say that continues into Q4. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we're taking John Sherrill next. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have anything particularly to add to the report. I think it speaks for itself, but very happy to take any questions that members wish to ask.
Yeah, this is going to be rapid. On to you, Kerry.
And just to pick up on your point at the start, Chair, obviously over recent months we've taken feedback from this committee and further iterated and evolved the report. So you'll see towards the front of the report there is a summary page which pulls forward all the RAG ratings for the various service areas and also pulls out the key challenges and highlights from the last quarter. We've also included towards the end of the report a small selection of high-level performance indicators, including trend information where we have it and also target information. As Councillor White has already stated, obviously keen to further evolve and iterate this report to make it as useful as possible. So any feedback on the format as well as obviously the contents would be very much welcome today. Thank you.
Okay, we have indication to speak from Charles Atkins.
Thank you. I appreciate this is a sort of backward-looking report, but I just want to draw out some of the implications for the present situation. For instance, on page 12, it talks about dealing with COVID. And I think I picked up somewhere that the government money for tracking COVID is shortly to end. And I think some local government organisations have called on the government to prolong that funding, because obviously we are dealing with a very high level of COVID infection at the moment, and obviously it's important that we track it. So is the County Council involved with that group of councils asking for that COVID grant to be continued? And if I could ask about another thing as well, the Household Support Fund, where you have an additional 5.5 million, how is that being used to help particularly disadvantaged communities deal with the cost of living crisis? Because clearly there are going to be families who are really going to be struggling literally to feed their families. So what do we do? I mean, obviously during the COVID lockdowns, we had food parcels and all that sort of thing. What is this? What have we learned from that period when we were providing a lot of sort of dry food and so on? What have we learnt in terms of that COVID period, and how are we going to use that knowledge and understanding to help families cope with a cost of living crisis which is likely to be fairly prolonged? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are not part of the group of councils that are appealing to the government for an extension of the COVID grant for the tracking. We've been clear that for the, I think, 3 months shy of 2 years, so around June of 2020, there was a realisation on Richard Harling's part and our part that at some point we were going to have to learn to live with COVID. This is part of the process of learning to live with COVID, the suspension of the the various impositions that were made by government. And I think I support that move in general. It's interesting, I had an acquaintance of mine was not feeling particularly well a couple of weeks ago. It was suggested that that person did a COVID test. The COVID test came back negative, and that person's colleagues then said, well, you're okay, then you can come into work. We've forgotten that actually people get ill with other things. So you can feel under the weather because you've got a cold or because you've got some condition or other. In fact, over coffee, we were just sharing all the list of conditions that people have that aren't anything to do with COVID. It's just life taking its toll. So we're not going to continue on with lobbying for COVID grant money. I appreciate, having had quite a long time in conversation with the trade unions last week, the teaching unions, that there is concern about the legacy of COVID for people's health in the classroom, and also speaking to NHS leaders across the county, there is some concern about COVID and the effect of their ability to deliver services. But there comes a point, doesn't there, where we just have to move on, and in the case of this, we are moving on. We still have local outbreak control board meetings going on. We've still got the architecture in place to allow us to spring back into operation should a variant arise that is going to cause greater mortality. And I think we should rest assured that that is the case. As far as the household support fund is concerned, I think the number we're talking about is 5.5 million. It isn't a great deal of money when it's divided by 8 districts and boroughs, and it's not going to go very far. Is there any learning we can draw out from our experience with COVID? Well, I would hope, I think we'd all hope, that the communities who pulled together in the way that they did during COVID would be able to pull together to help those people who are struggling. But that's not really a great answer, is it? I think we all have to acknowledge the cost of living crisis. It is here. People's fuel bills are going to be landing on the doorstep this week, I think, and certainly we're going to have another go at it in October. So it's a challenge that we've not seen for a generation or two, really. So an inadequate answer to your question, I'm afraid, Councillor Atkins. I don't know if John, if you wanted to add anything to that, or Ian.
Just a couple of thoughts. I think the paper does set out how that household support fund has been used, and that additional money would be used for similar measures. Again, just to reiterate what Councillor White has said, our COVID response is scalable, so it's at a much lower level than it has been previously. But should there be another variant that occurs that causes much greater concern than the current variant, then it is scalable. The organisation can switch back into COVID mode pretty seamlessly. I think the point around the cost of living crisis is something that we're still, I suppose, coming to terms with. The household support fund has been helpful for some families in relation to that. And there are other things we're doing, which I think the report touches on. The warmer homes work that we've been doing, I think, is absolutely spot on in terms of the crisis, both making people's energy more efficient from a climate point of view, but that getting people better heating and more efficient heating, I think, can also help with the kind of issues that people are facing due to the rising fuel costs, which is really important. And just on the cost of living crisis as well, this is something I guess that future reports to the committee will touch on as well, because that has implications for the council as well as it does for residents. We will find our own costs rising quite considerably over the time to come, and that's something we'll obviously keep the committee appraised of once we've done a proper analysis of what those impacts are from particularly the rising oil prices on our own costs.
Could I, Mr. Chairman, would it be possible just to bring Kerry Dove in, because she's got the absolute details. I've just spotted it here on the household support fund down to the pound and the postcode, I think.
And this is, as John said, it is in the report. But the household support fund was absolutely targeted at those households facing financial hardship, and we worked with district and boroughs in terms of how we distributed that grant appropriately to reflect the different circumstances that we have across the county. So already, a 1 million had been allocated to support residents with council tax arrears, over 780,000 on vouchers for 26,000 children eligible for free school meals, and a further 615,000 had been distributed to residents who had applied for additional help and support with food and emergency items, and just under 300k towards winter warmth. So we actually sought applications from people who were struggling to heat their home as part of that process.
To clarify, that's done via individual families applying to the fund. Is that how it works?
I don't have the specific details on how the grant ran. I think it was twofold. I think we did allocate some money to district and boroughs, as well as then offering up for applications. But again, we can get that further detail for you, Councillor Atkins.
Well, I'm sort of relieved that you're taking on board the issue about council tax arrears, because clearly later on in the report somewhere, I don't know, got it down somewhere, you're talking about debts in relation to council tax arrears. And I think that obviously that it is important that a certain amount of flexibility is used there. And I wouldn't thought that that flexibility should extend to the debt from the NHS, from CCGs, because that presumably is a rather different sort of debt. And I'd be interested to know whether there's a different approach in terms of CCG debt as opposed to individual residents who are having problems with their council tax arrears.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Councillor Parry would like to come in on about CCG debt, if he's still with us. Certainly, the CCG debt is something that Councillor Parry's predecessor, Councillor Sutherland, was very, very keen on. Very keen to make sure that they paid. They have been slow payers, and I've got to say the thing with the clinical commissioning groups, as was, and they're evolving into the integrated care system, or integrated care board now. They do have a bit of surplus cash floating around, and I certainly made the point to the chairman of the integrated care board that should they have any surplus cash that they wish to have any help spending, we would be more than able to assist them in that endeavour. But I don't know if Councillor Parry wanted to add anything to any other comments around debt.
I think, sorry, Chair. There's kind of three areas really. The council tax debt, which is about the collection fund, and I guess that's also been made a little bit more challenging due to the pandemic. But we're usually a fairly high performer in terms of collecting debt. Being mindful, of course, that we need to help those people that are struggling with that, and that's where that support fund has come in extremely useful. The other area, of course, is care cost debt, where clients have an indebtedness to the county council, and that's something which is, I think, robustly but sensitively followed up. And then probably the most challenging area is this health partners debt, which continues and still continues to be a very difficult area to work with. Again, at the Q4, I think the situation's slightly improved, but still a significant outstanding debt that we need to bear down on. And I'm keen, as my predecessor was keen, to ensure that we do everything we possibly can to ensure that they pay up. And as the leader says, there's no shortage of funds on that side of the fence.
Suggest that the forward development of integrated care is going to be terribly successful if the NHS can't even pay its debts to us at the moment. I imagine that when we go forwards into integrated care, it'll be even more complex situation. It doesn't augur well for the future.
And that's a fair point and a fair challenge, Chair, because I think I don't think this is an unwillingness to pay or a disputed debt. I think this is just systems. I think this is just the way the health service tends to work, and obviously this is something that we need to get a grip of with them, as Councillor Atkins rightly says, it becomes even more complex and more challenging as we move into the ICS later this year.
Okay, can we take Councillor Mike Worthington?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just really wanted to ask about the successful Warmer Homes programme, because it's great to get an additional 5.9 million of funding. I could like to know at some point, not today, but how much of that funding has gone to the District Council of Stafford and Moorlands, because it would be very useful to know, because with the cap on heating energy bills, obviously a lot of people are going to be needing this Warmer Homes programme to access it. So if we could get that information at some point, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor White or John Treadwell?
Sorry, we don't have the details with us, but we did have a conversation yesterday at the senior leadership team about the Q4 report, and it was agreed that we would put some more detail in that report around the metrics that go with the Warmer Homes Fund to show how it's been spent and where it's been spent.
Could I just observe that for the Insulate Britain nut jobs, okay, a lot of money is going into insulating homes. There's more to do, okay, but certainly making sure that as many as we can are getting insulated is absolutely the right thing to do. It is the best way of reducing not only carbon emissions, but reducing people's bills. And with the cost of living as it is, I think that's the best thing we can achieve. John Treadwell's already dealt with the point about more detail for you at the next report, Councillor Worthington. Just to the money side of working with the NHS before we skip off that, there is a very significant cultural difference in the way that we account for money in a council compared to the way they account for money in the NHS, and that cultural difference is going to make the integration piece very difficult indeed. Councillor Parry each year has to present a balanced budget to the authority in order to resolve council tax, and that's what we do. If we run out of money in February, okay, we have to stop doing stuff. And you know, some councils have been in that place where they've had to suspend activities because they've run out of money. If you turn up to A&E in February with a broken leg and let's say UHDB's run out of money, you're still going to get your leg fixed because they have to do that. And so it tends to a very different culture for managing money. We run a good and balanced budget. The NHS runs things called control totals, which is basically a budget plus an amount on top, and you just keep on going, doing your activity, not really too mindful of the money. So that cultural difference strikes at the way we approach our integration efforts. It is going to leave us with a huge challenge, which will be difficult to reconcile.
Happy with that, Councillor Worthington? While we're on the subject of warmer homes, can I ask the question about how the delivery system's working? Because I know as a district councillor it's been something that has been problematic. The facilities of providing grant is there, but actually getting it to the right people, is that something that is improving or any alterations taking place?
It's like University Challenge.
I'm sorry, I don't have any detail on that. Again, perhaps in the next report we can give that more detailed breakdown of how we've dealt with the Warmer Homes Fund. I'm sure there have been some teething difficulties as we've got into that, but we have helped many hundred homes, many hundred families already, and we're going to help many hundred more. So we are getting the money out there and making a difference to people. But we'll give some more information around how we've targeted it and what the teething problems have been in the next report.
Okay. Coupled with that, I saw on page 16 of the PDF, there's various things like the BRFC, the Levelling Up Fund, the Household Support Fund. There's a variety of different funds available, and I have to admit that I don't understand what all of these different funds attack or address, probably the better word. So how does that look on the ground? Are we finding any difficulties in terms of interpreting that with users? Probably the same question that needs further development.
This is just like University Challenge, isn't it? You're Jeremy Paxman, and wish we could say pass on occasions, but we can't. You're right. It's a real bag of mixed things going on, and I'm struggling with some of the funds to understand how we can realise the best for the people of Staffordshire, because some of them appear to be pretty piecemeal, and sometimes you're better off having a big effect in an area rather than sort of lots of little piecemeal effects. So what we certainly have is better cooperation amongst the districts and boroughs in the county across Staffordshire than we've ever had. We've got a leaders board set up where we're dealing with issues that are common to all of us, and I hope that we'll be able, through that leaders board, to be able to bring issues like that to the fore and start to understand how we can do stuff better together with these various funds. John, have you got anything?
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where we, as part of our lobbying and local government generally, have made it clear to the government it isn't helpful that these funds are often competition-led. So rather than it being allocated to areas on the basis of some form of needs formula, it is a case of people having to compete for the funds, and it is done in a piecemeal way, and it's not helpful in terms of that planning. The bit that does work really well, I think, is that cooperation between ourselves and the district councils, as Councillor White has said. That is working in terms of all the different funds, which I think is a great success here in Staffordshire. But that whole competitive process is something that it would be great if the government would rethink and start to think about allocating the funds on a more needs-based basis.
Okay, I share the same concerns. Councillor Bernard Peters.
Thank you, Chair. Can I move the subject on now, if I may? Paragraph 26 is really, really exciting to have read back in Q3, the resettlement of the Afghans. But I just wonder now, as we look at the circumstances that we're facing across the world, what is the Council's position regarding the accommodation of any Ukrainian citizens that may find themselves in Staffordshire? Have we got the capacity? Is funding available? How will we approach that particular piece of work? Because I am almost sure that it's knocking on the door.
I think it's still in the early stages in terms of our work on the Ukrainian issue. The Strategic Resilience Forum in Staffordshire has considered this issue and has set up a tactical coordinating group in Staffordshire, which we as an authority are leading. Our key officer here in the County Council is Natasha Moody, the Assistant Director, who's been dealing so far with the Afghan refugee issues, and we are looking at the various guidance that we've had from the government and considering how we gear ourselves up to support this as and when it becomes a pressing issue for us. I think we still need to get clarity in terms of the guidance and understanding what our role is. So what's our role, for example, in relation to these people who have volunteered to host Ukrainian families and individuals. That all still needs some working through, but there is a team that's working on it. They are the team that has worked previously in terms of the Afghan and other refugee and asylum issues, and they have a lot of experience now in doing that. I'm sure it will be a challenge finding accommodation for people within the county, but I think the one thing that we have said from the leader down is that we are committed to doing what we can here in Staffordshire to help with that particular crisis, but probably still a bit early yet to give you a detailed breakdown of what's happening on the ground in Staffordshire just yet.
Right, thank you very much for that. The thing that sparked my question as well, of course, was the impact on social care, healthcare, education. It's a massive multi-headed beast, isn't it? And it'll be really, really interesting to see how it unpacks set against a framework of capacity and available funding. Thank you.
Next to speak is Councillor Kath Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine actually related to the previous conversation about the warmer home. Sorry about that. I just think that the funding obviously is distributed a lot to the borough and district councils for them to distribute as they see the demand. Maybe a paper from each of those, because do they do it all the same? Or each district and borough different in how they apply those that are accessing the warmer home scheme? I know in South Staffs we've got an awful lot of housing association properties. How do they access, you know, who's it that through? I think maybe just a paper. It's a bit of the dynamics of underneath that heading, basically. I would like to know a little bit more. So maybe a paper from each of the district and boroughs would be acceptable to receive, so we can understand it a little bit better. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any response, Councillor White?
Yeah, I think we've undertaken to come back with more detail for the Q4 report. You're right to highlight the fact that different districts and boroughs are approaching it differently, because Tamworth and Cannock, for example, have got their own housing stock, whereas other districts and boroughs have relinquished theirs. Kerry, was there anything you wanted to add? I thought you were desperate to say something a moment ago.
No, my point was back to the proliferation of different funds, of which obviously Warmer Homes is one as well. Just to point out that as part of the Levelling Up White Paper, central government have recognised that the current competitive culture isn't particularly helpful for local authorities, and they have, as part of that white paper, said they are going to review the current situation and look to streamline. That is probably going to be focused more on the economic development funding pots, but hopefully that might lead to a bit of a shift in how central government look at those funds moving forward. I was part of a meeting the other week where the department did come and do an initial conversation with local authorities about the work that they're trying to do around streamlining, and there will be opportunity for local authorities to be consulted. Thank you.
Councillor Jill Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, going back to the Ukrainian refugee problem, there's a lot of holiday cottages in the Moorlands, and I have two families, one at Hollinsclough and one in Flash, who very kindly registered to donate a cottage so that they would have their own access and a family, you know, a family or 3 or 4 people easily accommodated for a year. My point is they've registered, but they're struggling. They're really struggling. But I've put them in touch with officers here, and some information came through the other day that I passed on. At the moment, they are really frustrated because they want to do it now, you know, and they say for a year, which is quite a long time, isn't it? And there's the schools in Hollinsclough that needs pupils. There's everything there, really. They've resorted to speaking to people in Poland now, so it's just a frustration of getting a family to come over. It's very kind of them to give that up for a year.
Councillor Atkins talked about lessons learned from the pandemic, and sadly it seems as if some lessons aren't learned from the pandemic. So when the government asked for NHS volunteers to come forward, 750,000 people stepped forward, and 750,000 people then kept waiting, and actually the voluntary work that took place was done by local government. I think if government could have the confidence to say, you know, local government, you crack on with it, and we know you're good enough to get it sorted, we'd get it sorted. Instead of which, you've got people who people trying to coordinate it from Whitehall, young people who have haven't really got a great deal of experience under their belt, and think that everything can be done from an app in Whitehall. And if this is being streamed right into Whitehall, then devolve it back to us, and we'll get it sorted out for you. There you go. Mr. Chairman, I think Councillor Parry had pointed out he needed to leave at 11. I don't know if you clocked that.
Yes, is there anything specifically with Councillor Parry you wanted to raise? I did have one question, actually, on the statement that you've made within this Q3 report, and the comment that was about, bear in mind this is Q3 ending December, as far as the new Children and Families scheme is concerned, the target has been achieved for the whole year, which I saw it as pointing to 3.963 million positive for the quarter. Does that mean for the end of the year there'll be a surplus that was unexpected?
Chair, I think yes, and forgive me because I made an error in my opening remark and said September is of course December. And yes, I think at the year end there is a more, I think, robust figure in terms of those savings projections. So it hasn't slipped.
Okay, any other questions for Councillor Parry before he leaves? No? Okay, we'll carry on with the meeting. Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Parry. And while we're on the subject of the Ukrainians, I will give an anecdotal story from my division. I had somebody lobby me as a resident saying, what are the local authorities doing? And that's the general local authorities, because people don't understand what the different authorities do. But specifically in terms of county facilities, there are buildings that are mothballed. And the one that was identified to me was the one on Scotch Orchard, which was a daycare centre. And the suggestion was, can the county council make a building available? Has that been something the county's looked at?
Add Nivden Hall in Leek.
Yeah, there are some buildings we might be slightly cautious about bringing back into use. Scotch Orchard was pretty gloomy anyway. It would need quite a lot of work doing to it before we put anybody into it, because I don't think it's particularly habitable, really. Nivden Hall, I don't know what the state of Nivden Hall is, but you've hit upon something we hadn't thought about, or I hadn't thought about, should I say, and we'll take that away and give it some consideration. Thank you.
I've been in Scotch Orchard, so I do know what you're talking about, but I think it's better than Mariupol might be at the moment. Might be an improvement for some.
Only marginally.
Yeah. Councillor Kath Parry.
Thank you. Whilst I agree it's amicable to do that, to use buildings, it's not just about the accommodation, it's the other things that go with that, schooling, all the other things. So it's all nice to have all of these things, but you have to think about the long term for children being educated, the schools provision and all of those kind of things as well, which I'm sure you've already thought about. So I'm all in agreement, but it's not just about a roof over their heads, it's about the accessing the medical things as well. So there's all the other details that need to be thought about when we think about opening up buildings. Okay, thank you.
I think you're making a similar point to the one that Councillor Peters made. I think we're in agreement on that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, just really a question for John Tradewell. Page 22, paragraph 57, talks about the 2021 Community Fund. There seems to have been quite a few delays in paying out this money, and I wondered whether that was because we're not allocating enough staff to the function, because certainly I've had reported to me the significant delays of groups expecting to get monies from the community fund, and there being significant delays. Councillor Asfar raised it with me, but also other people have mentioned that there have been delays. And I don't know whether it's general or whether he's just been unfortunate. But I think in terms of some of mine as well, been quite a significant delay. So if you could look into that for me, that would be great, because I do think that, you know, once someone fills in a form and it wings its way to the county, they sort of expect to get a response reasonably timely, not months later, and that's my concern.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I hadn't been aware of that, and it is something I will look into. We've always tried to make the members' fund, I think, the most easy fund to access, really, so that we can get those small sums of money to those groups that need it as quickly as possible. So it's disappointing to know that that hasn't been working in every case, and I'll look into that and make sure that if there are problems, those are resolved. It's not a resourcing issue. I don't know what the issue is, but we'll get to the bottom of that.
Councillor White.
Thank you for raising that point. It was originally the Labour group, when they were in control here, introduced the community fund. It's a good idea, and that's the reason why we've kept it going. Its lack of bureaucracy is the thing that makes it so useful, but therein lies a problem which we have to acknowledge. And I think, Councillor Worthington, you've done that in some detail in a meeting that you had last week. Yeah.
That was the Climate Change Fund, which I think was audited differently from the Community Fund. Yeah. I think that's one of the issues, is that the Climate Change Fund had a very less rigorous audit process, and having read that report, significant failings in that respect.
My point is that we don't want to encumber the funds if we can possibly avoid it with too much bureaucracy, because then you detract from the utility of the funding. It is always the case, isn't it, that the reason why we have laws in place is because you're always having to deal with one person who does something completely stupid, because actually laws just describe minimum standards of behaviour, don't they? That's all. The reason why we've got speed limits on the road is because people apparently don't have the common sense to look at the road they're driving on and drive at an appropriate speed. Because, for example, Kevin decides he's going to get himself drunk and drive at 60 miles an hour down an urban road and hit somebody. Therefore, the speed limit has to be 30. If common sense applied, you wouldn't need to do that sort of thing, would you? So, with these funds, I think the thing that I'd like to just stick with is this simplicity that it has. Yes, give it a little bit of oversight, but allow communities to get on with stuff. Because the second you start encumbering it with loads of clutter is the moment that the point of it ceases. It's hard enough for us as a big organisation to apply for government funds in competition, as John Tradewell and Kerry Dove alluded to earlier. So I think that keeping it as simple as possible is the right way ahead, and controlled by local members, because it's the, as we always say, it's the local members who know their areas best.
Councillor Withington.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on the leader's statement there mentioning the audit. It's a fantastic scheme. When you think that of all the applications, we only get one problem, I think really just show that that scheme is an excellent scheme and well worth pursuing. Thank you.
I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I don't think one problem is probably the right description. I mean, there have been other issues that I had where, and it wasn't anything to do with the county's administration of it. The cheque was, well, the back's payment was raised and got lost in the system. And it was actually a school where it had gone to an individual into an account and they weren't able to trace the payment. But that took a long time to resolve for me. So I'm sort of with Councillor Atkins in terms of it being a resourcing matter, because there's one person that we've got as a contact point for the various schemes. As I say, the money was actually transferred, but I spent a lot of time trying to unwind why it hadn't been arrived at the person who'd made the application. And it had gone through the bursar or whatever finance person at the school and wasn't traceable. So you know, it's not just one instance. Nothing else on that. There's one other comment I wanted to make, and I wanted to comment on the appendix because nobody's referred to the charts yet. But the one comment before we get to that is relating to item 10 on page 15, which is about Community Champions programme. And I wondered, I read that it's only fairly new and it's being trialled in Burton, but I wondered how it's likely to be reported when it's had its chance to have its trial programme, and if it needs any overview by a overview and scrutiny committee. Does anybody have any comments on that?
As you say, Chair, it is in the early stages, but from discussing this with colleagues in public health, they're really optimistic about the potential for this programme and the potential for it to be rolled out as appropriate across the county. I think some overview would be helpful, and especially given everyone's local insight as well, I think that would be hugely welcomed. So we can pick that up with public health colleagues for you.
Any other comments? Because I want to get into the charts, which are starting on page 27 and Appendix 1. I think I made a note of what Kerry described them as high-level performance indicators, which I would prefer to refer to as the dashboard. It's the sort of thing that I've referred to at previous meetings about what would make me, if I was on the cabinet, very sleepless in terms of seeing some charts that were significant trends that might be jarring. And I think this is the result of the discussions that we've had. I know the Cabinet have been keen to have key performance indicators. And I've said before, I don't think we want the old regime of however many there were, 100 plus different KPIs that were churned out by local government for the sake of it, without anybody ever taking any notice of them. I think these are quite impactful, and I think it's just about the right sort of number. It certainly covers the spectrum of the local authorities' view. So can I say thank you to Kerry and the team for having produced them. I know we've had various discussions about them. I find them particularly useful. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to finance and charts and stats. But it's interesting when you look at page 27 that the business startup rates are relatively poor for Staffordshire when you compare it to West Midlands and United Kingdom. And I like the fact that you've got the consistent colour schemes throughout, so you can spot Staffordshire versus West Midlands versus UK. But interestingly, when you then look at the next chart, Staffordshire's got a far better survival rate. So when we're talking to business, we say, well, yeah, we are a bit slow in getting businesses going, but we make sure that they work. So in some respects, the one chart answers the other chart, which is really useful. I know we've had discussions about highways, which is one of my favourite subjects, and I've referred to the highways chart, which shows category 1 and category 2 defects, and I've had discussions with Kerry about we need some form of category 3 measure, because that's the postbag one for most members. People aren't particularly bothered about the great gaping, what do they call it when the whole thing disappears? Technical term for the sinkhole, yeah, for the sinkhole. The sinkholes have to be repaired. They're category 1. It's the category 3s that annoy people because they see them being long-term fixes. So I have discussed the fact we need a category 3 measure as well. But I actually think these actually present quite well now. We've got the consistent colours theme, and you can see where Staffordshire relates, and you can see if there are priorities. So are there any comments that members would like to make in terms of the charts? Councillor White.
I've always felt that being transparent with scrutiny is the most helpful thing to do, and trying to obscure our position in the world with words when actually numbers and charts actually get you there much more quickly is more helpful, because it tells you where to emphasise. Functioning economic geography, to the point you were making a moment ago, is something that I'm very keen on. It's been something I've been working on for 20 years in my professional life, and therefore the business survival rates are the key indicator, not just the startup rates. And you can always draw the wrong conclusions with business startups. Some people will start up a business as a lifestyle objective. So you often find middle-aged people who are sick and tired of commuting into and out of a town or a city will set up a business in their front room. They'll work at home for 4 days of the week and go into town 1 day of the week and be paid through their business rather than being paid a salary with their former employer. So you can draw the wrong conclusions if you just think you've got a load of startups and that's a good thing. It's how long they last for is the key indicator. The Highways Transformation Project is something that goes to Prosperous Scrutiny Committee on, I think, the 15th of April, where the committee will get the opportunity to look at the transformation programme and how it intends to tackle the category 1, 2, and particularly the category 3 potholes. There is a buzz phrase that's being used to deal with that, which is right first time. It's a less, according to the highways Johnnies who know about this sort of stuff, it's a less efficient way of doing stuff, but it's what people want. They want, if they don't understand why, if there's a collection of potholes or sinkholes, to use your terminology, Mr. Chairman, they never get that big, do they? But when the team turns up, do all of them, get them out of the way, rather than messing around doing the category 1s, because I'm a category 1, the elite, the category 1 team do all the category 1s and then go off and do another category 1. Well, you know, you've got to slum it and do the category 3s as well whilst you're at it. And we're very keen that happens. But against that, we've got the cost of bitumen and tarmac is going through the roof. I think I was told last week, I'm looking to those people who might remember, I think it's gone up by 30-something% tarmac. So whilst we're putting in an additional £15.5 million into the highways programme, I'm afraid to say inflation is going to steal away quite a good chunk of that. So the quicker we can get over this inflationary spike that we're witnessing, Mr. Chairman, which I know you're very keen on because you're very much a numbers person, the better.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to move we accept the recommendation and thank the officers for a very, very transparent report and very interesting and easy to follow. Thank you.
Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I'm just interested, page 28, why the tonnage of waste sent direct to landfill has suddenly gone up. What is the reason for that?
White, are you able to answer that?
I can give you a good stab at it. You'll find the numbers started to go up during lockdown. People were buying loads of stuff on Amazon, hoofing it into the bin, and off it went to landfill. The tonnages, as a veteran of the Joint Waste Management Board many years ago, the tonnage is going to the waste that we produce directly correlated to GDP. So as GDP goes up by 2%, waste arisings go up by 2%. And I think layered into that was people working from home and getting stuff in, like, for example, stuff that will never be used again, like their Peloton. Buy the Peloton in a box, throw this stuff into the bin, off it goes to landfill. I think that's probably what sits behind that. It's a guess, but I think it's probably a fairly well-educated guess.
I mean, all the packaging hopefully would go into recycling as opposed to, you mean the actual item itself goes into the waste bin? I mean, I
think there's going to be a lot of Pelotons going in the waste bin shortly.
While we're on page 28, just to test my knowledge on this, the top chart, the tons of carbon emissions, I see the reference point saying it's an annual report, but it's not reported till Q2 22-23. Will that be the summary of the year 2021? Because we seem to be missing a year.
Leave that one with us and we'll clarify.
Sorry? We don't know the answer. Pass. We'll get back to you.
Yes, there will be a lag in that data anyway, but like I say, it does feel like we might be missing a year. So leave that one with us and we'll explore it in more detail.
And on the subject of waste, still on the third one that Councillor Charlotte has just referred to, the tonnage of waste sent to landfill, it's the only one that doesn't seem to have any comparison reference point. Is there anything that the industry does, or the local government-wide report of an average for a area?
There is, and we can get that for you and include it in the next report.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a quick reply to what you're saying about the price of tarmac going up. The price of diesel's gone up. The price of vehicle movement in general, it's still cheaper to do 3 potholes when one's huge and 3 are nearly huge, because the next week those 3 are going to be huge and they've got to come back all that way. And in my part of the world, it's a journey of 20-25 minutes to get from a depot, more when they come from down this way. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous to do 1 pothole and leave 3 that are going to be huge within a few days. And to me, it's just nonsense, because just don't think of tarmac, think of the photographs they have to take and the time they take and the bruise they have to have when they arrive after an hour's journey and the bruise they have to have before they go back for an hour's journey. Get the lot done. I've got roads that are falling to pieces and I put them onto the reported and they come back not urgent. I've got David Williams supposed to be coming out with me beginning of April when he's got the time. I'm going to show him these roads, because when I get the report back, we go through in a Range Rover and it's, you know, so our little cars cope. And this is a tourist area. It's just, so the argument tarmac's dearer, rubbish. And if they did it properly the first time, they wouldn't have to come back and do it again in a couple of months and put more tarmac in. Having said that, I know there's no reply. I'll second Councillor Worthington's motion.
No, you're right. It's infuriating for members of the public and councillors that that this doesn't get done in the way that you talk about. And you're also right to identify the brew thing. Okay, there was one of our vehicle. Well, it was a highways vehicle in Councillor Greatorex's division. A resident phoned me to say, "Your blokes have arrived," as if they're mine. Okay, your blokes have arrived, and they're currently having a bacon sandwich outside my house in their van. Okay. They've been eating their bacon sandwich for an hour, smoking fags, rollies, and drinking tea or coffee. They've come out, they've done a couple of hours' work, and then they've gone back into their cab for something else to eat. So, you know, making sure that these things are done correctly and that council taxpayers are getting value for their money and the work is being done is something that we're very, very keen to push on. And anybody who's got reports of people, of the crews, because if you think about it, that's 1 hour per day just eating bacon, 5 hours per week eating bacon sarnies on the council taxpayers' blooming dollar.
The comparison was made between those crews and the Leela crews who were putting in the broadband connectivity, you know, who were digging up the pavements. Started at 7:30 in the morning, did not stop. You know, I mean, people who are not political were sort of stopping me in the street saying their work ethic was unbelievable. You know, and it was just like constant. It doesn't matter what the weather was like, they just went through and just did everything. And although I had a couple of complaints, minor complaints, generally people were incredibly impressed by the way they just got through difficult work very quickly.
Well, seeing as we're sharing anecdotes, Cadents are doing work in Councillor Greatorex's division at the moment, and what a job they're doing. They're working like stink, and when they've finished it, they're making the grass verges are immaculate again. They've reseeded them. You know yourself, it's a bit of a pain at the moment to get round the work, but they're doing a fantastic job.
Anything else about how well my division's doing? Anybody else? Right. Okay. Well, I think with the positives on the charts, and I'm glad to hear that. And obviously, we've got the next quarter where we'll have 1 or 2 improvements, hopefully. Are there any other comments for the quarter 3 report? Okay. Yeah, we're happy to note the report. Thank you. And that means that if you want to, you can leave. We'll see you next time. Okay. Well, that takes us to item 5, which is the work programme. And as you can see, most of the year is greyed out. The work programme starting on page 71 of our PDF. And you can see there that we've got the next quarter, quarter 4, will be considered on the 5th of April. And then after that, we've got various things, TBCs, diversity and inclusion. We've got for equal opportunities. I see that we've said consider the 3 partnerships individually, Amy, Entrust and Nexus. I really do think we need to separately consider those. They're not the same nature of partnership. So it's really 3 separate subject areas we need to look at. Obviously one of them in particular is not progressing anyway, but we possibly need to have separate papers on those at separate times. And then we've got digital strategy on, again, and we have considered that in the past. Any comments on anything that we need to add to the work programme, or any comments on what we've got there? Okay, further down we've got the people strategy, looking at that being refreshed in June 22, so we need a pre-decision scrutiny. That might be something we can put on in advance of it getting too far down the line.
There's been a lot said, hasn't there, about recruitment and retention. If the retention policy is getting better, and something we never touch on, but it's often mentioned, some sort of overview of exit interviews, I think, might be useful, looking back. Just on a point of information, really, and if there are any themes, what's being done to address them?
It's something related to the last item, because I didn't notice we've got high demand for adult social care and capacity issues in both the NHS and adult social care, numerous actions to try and do better retention and recruitment. So maybe we have that focus on where we know we've got problems. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. We did ask for a report. I don't know how often we were going to receive regarding the gender as well. Is this part? Could this all be part of the one report? These were people that you know, the gender formation of the county council.
We have given that scrutiny in the past, haven't we? It's been to corporate review before. Was there anything you particularly wanted to see that's different?
No, I just thought that what Councillor Bernard just said regarding you know, retention and of staff, as to whether or not that there's a sort of an HR report, if you like, that this would be another section within the HR report.
Put it on the agenda, particularly looking at recruitment and things like future office, as it says there. But I think the report might well concentrate on whether there's any gender differences. I know that's one of the issues that does drive our workforce, that there's a lot of part-time work predominantly taken up by more females than males, so there's always going to be that difference. But yes, we can put that bias towards that people strategy analysis, so that's possible. Anything else on the work programme? No? Okay, well, item 6 is the exclusion of the public. There are no items in part 2, so we'll conclude the meeting.